Okay, excuse me, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome everybody this morning. Special council meeting today dealing with bridges. With the way the weather is out there, I think we can probably make snow dams now and get across any river we want. Correct, Mr. Cook? Mr. Akins? Yeah, okay. We'll do that then. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? Conflict of interest from anyone? Seeing none? Then we'll get right down to business. We have a couple of individuals here from Triton Engineering. They're going to give us a bridge and culvert prioritization and their presentation. The laptop's all up and everything ready to go. Gentlemen, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Well, thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for having us here again. As you recall, the last time we were here was September 18th, and in that meeting we reviewed the bridge prioritization program rationale, and we provided further details of the variables that are the product of determining the total risk of asset failure. So essentially a method to non-subjective way of reviewing and prioritizing each of your structures. As an update from the last time we were here, we have now assessed a total of 103 of your 114 structures. The 103 that are priority to your transportation, your vehicular transportation network. So the remaining structures are pedestrian bridges or ones that are not on your vehicular transportation network. Just as a recap, the total risk of asset failure, if you recall, is the total probability of asset failure by the total consequence of asset closure or failure. And again, as I mentioned, the purpose of this is to provide a quantitative approach to your asset management. It is essentially something that piggybacks onto your asset management. It goes one step further to prioritize your structures. So we're not just looking at your biannual bridge inspections, BCIs, your bridge condition index. We're not just going by that. We're going one step further and prioritizing your structures with other variables. And I'll have Mike, my colleague Mike Heath here, get into greater detail of that.
All right. So just to kind of set the stage, and I guess one of the reasons that this kind of arose. So you got in the municipality of West Grey, there are 37 structures over the age of 70 years. And this is of concern because the average expected useful life of a bridge in Ontario ranges between 64 to 88 years, and that's from Statistics Canada 2024. So recent 2024 OSIM reports have identified 25 structures that have a BCI under 70 with a service life less than 10 years and are considered critical from an asset management perspective. So using the 2024 OSIM as reference, at least 41 structures are coming due in the next 20 years for major rehabilitation and or full replacement. Okay. And then this is just a summary of the total risk of asset failure equation here. So it's the probability of failure times the consequence of closure or failure, and a higher numeric value. The total risk of asset failure generally indicates a higher priority in the bridge prioritization program.
We're just on the next slide. So, yeah.
Yep. Okay. So for the total probability of failure, so it's the sum of the following components and scored out of 5 each. So we have the average daily traffic. The counts were provided by the municipality. We have the bridge condition index, and that's the structural rating from the OSIM report. Those two are added together to get the total probability of failure. A higher value indicates a higher probability of failure. So then we have the total consequence of closure or failure. It's the sum of the following components scored out of 5 each. Average daily traffic, which is consistent with the total probability of failure. The detour length measured in kilometers, the distance from one side of the structure to the other without crossing. Change in emergency response time, measured in minutes, resulting from the closure of a structure. And local access, which is just an inconvenience factor for a closed structure to residents and the community. A higher value would indicate greater consequence to the public as a result of the closure or failure.
Does anyone have any questions thus far about that? That was just a recap on the, what we went through the previous time we were here. So if anyone had any questions on that. Yes.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. So how does the average daily traffic actually impact on the probability of failure? Is it the more cars are going to cause more strain, or is it there's more demand, meaning the bridge is more important?
Well, both essentially. Yeah. So the higher the traffic flow on the structure, the greater risk there is for asset failure. The more vehicles that are using it is the more demand that structure has to your entire transportation, your overall transportation network. So it essentially is both of those. They play into the ADT, the average daily traffic, plays into both the probability of failure as well as the consequence of failure. So they into both of those variables, and that's why it's consistent in both. So it follows that same. Yeah, it's calculated within both, as it is one of your most important factors when it comes to structures and the use of your overall transportation network.
A structure that had a very, very low ADT, say an ADT approaching 0, would rank low in the probability of failure and consequence of failure.
Generally, yes, yeah, depending on the other variables and how but yes, if the lower the number, the lower it would rank. That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So this table here, we present the highest risk for total risk of asset failure. So these structures have the potential to significantly impact the transportation network of West Grey if they require closure or they are currently closed. So these are a combination here of total probability of failure. So structures that have a low BCI and high traffic counts is generally what this list is comprised of, as well as structures that have significant changes to their emergency response times. A few of these structures here also, so an example of, so EG001, that one scores so high because it isolates residents if that one was to become closed. Okay. Okay, so this table here are the structures that present the lowest risk. So these structures are either still structurally capable of performing as designed, or they will have less of an impact if they require closure or they are currently closed. So these structures generally don't see much daily traffic, and there are detour options generally available to first responders or emergency services. Yeah. Okay, so this is just a summary of the years of service life remaining. So this table here, when we get to the priority list in the coming slides, so the years of service life play obviously a critical role here. So these ones have the lowest remaining years of service life in the municipality of West Grey. If you see a value of 0 for years of service life, they are currently closed.
And it should be noted that all of these last 3 slides that were presented make up the priority list. So they were assessed when looking at the actual structure priority list. years of service life. Obviously, if a structure is closed, doesn't necessarily mean it's on your high priority, but this is just a summary of those structures that made it on, that are on your, the lowest amount of years of service life.
Just in your other two slides, structures open or closed. Most of those structures you have as open. But let's just go to EG1. In the first slide, it shows structure status, open. You get to this slide, and you're telling me all of these structures are closed. The ones that are at 0, you just said are closed. Yet in that first slide, they're all showing that mostly they're open. Yeah, which,
So,
can't, as my CEO says, you can't suck and blow. They're either open or they're closed.
so yeah, they're not the same structures. So the one you pointed out, EG 001, that one would be the one that does say open and has it has a BCI of 37, indicating it should be closed. However, we talked to Jeff and there have been repairs done on that one. So it can remain open, but there's no updated BCI for that one. So that's the only one that has a 0 and it says open. The rest of them are closed currently.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, I clear that up. Yeah, yeah. The EG 001 was the only structure that prior to this being completed, it was taken out of closure, or the need for closure, because it was repaired by your internal forces.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Prior to this being made up.
That's correct. Yeah. Or just like the information we had, it's remained open because of that. So since it was reviewed in 2024, it's been corrected. So it still remains open now. But we don't have an updated BCI for it. So yeah,
The bridge, it's culverts. No, it's not.
it's a culvert. Yeah.
Just a slight technical thing.
Sure.
That's good.
Yep.
We'll get that updated.
Okay. Sounds good. Yes.
Mr. Hutchison.
This goes back to our director, but on the mapping that we originally had with all the bridges on one, it doesn't show up, EG 01. So, I knew where it was, but I wasn't too sure why it wasn't on our original plan.
Yeah, you are correct. It previously hasn't shown up in any drawings until this year when we became aware of a problem. So that's been corrected moving forward.
Through Mr. Mayor, I do believe that it was on the report that bridge is now, or that culvert is now added to the map in the report. So.
Okay. So we'll move on to these. Sorry. Yep.
Joyce, go ahead.
I guess I'm a little confused. You're saying what's reported here is like prior to some bridge closures, because on that first chart, that N060, it's reflecting open, but it is a closed bridge now.
Sort of. N060 on the
The total risk of asset failure, highest risk.
highest risk.
Yeah, it's closed.
N60 is open. It is open. That's on your 12th concession, the Three Bridges Road. Yeah, and
Oh, I apologize.
that's okay. This is
Thinking it's the one on.
yeah, unfortunately, as a
16.
presentation to this is very difficult to show all the structures as we go here, because there's so many, and it would be nice to have a picture for each of them, but these are essentially, they just look like numbers on a page, which they are.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry about that.
that's okay.
Okay. So we'll move on to the structure priority list slide. Okay, so this list here is derived from the highest risk for total probability of asset failure, as well as estimated remaining service life from the 2024 OSIM reports. This list will be kept up to date with structures analyzed biannually in collaboration with OSIM reporting. A closed structure that isolates property from the transportation network is given the highest priority, which is why we see a structure like EG001 on there. So yep, we have 37 and 38 at the top for highest priority. There's localized flooding known to occur on this road segment, and when that happens, it has the potential to isolate residents. EG001 is next. Same issue. Residents on the other side of this culvert. This is their only way to get access to the transportation network. For structures 51, N51 and B003, these structures both have a high ADT, indicating that they will be important to the transportation network and have limited, or they're currently closed. G44 has lengthy detours and emergency response times. If the structure was to become closed, I believe that one is going to be repaired this year. G132, similar issue to EG001. G132 just has a couple of years of service life remaining, so that's why it's down at 7. And then so at the bottom, N60 and N58, those are the 3 bridges there. They say about, in 2016, they saw about 1,200 vehicles a day. So I believe they had the highest ADT other than the Garifraxa Street Bridge. And B20 is on this list. The road segment adjacent to it saw an ADT of 953. Okay.
If I could add this, as we say in the report, it's important that you maintain this document as a living document. Every year, on your biannual inspections, every 2 years, you revisit this priority list essentially. So right now, after 2025, EG001 and G044 they should be removed and bumped. Other structures will bump up into the list of your top 10. What's important to note is that 38 and 37 are next on your list, and your highest priority. And they have not been addressed at this point yet. And then N50 will become your third priority structure. N51, sorry. But you'll need to update this just as you do your asset management plan. This follows suit to update these priority structures on a biannual basis. And you'll want to revisit all of your variables as traffic counts may change. Say you were to have a development in an area in 5 years or 6 years that cause more traffic to utilize that road segment. What this is looking at is the importance to your overall transportation network to adequately maintain a level of service to your community.
Okay, we'll move on to the next slide, candidate structures for closure. So these are the structures that we have identified as candidates for closure. The highlighted structures are currently closed. This is based on their total consequence of closure or failure to the transportation network. These structures can be considered for closure at the end of their service life. Closure would result in a replacement capital and life cycle cost savings up to 23 million for structures listed based on typical 2024 concrete construction values. So these structures here would see a low volume of ADT and their emergency detours would be minimally impacted. That's generally what these structures would be here.
And that's as compared to the other structures. So that we say minimally impacted, there will be an impact, but as from the greater good of your community, when we're looking at the greater good and the approach, these are the structures that are candidates for, pardon me, structure closure. That would have the least amount of impact on your entire overall transportation network and to maintain that level of service.
Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. So through the development of this program, Triton has completed an in-depth review and evaluation of 103 of the 114 structures critical to the vehicular transportation network in West Grey. This program has identified 10 structures approaching the end of their service life that are essential to the overall transportation network, and 10 structures that are proposed to either remain closed or become closed at the end of their service life. These strategic closures ensure the essential structures within the community receive adequate resources to provide an overall sustainable transportation network. These continued structural evaluations are intended to assist the municipality with their structural asset management planning to remain in compliance with OREG 58817, which is the asset management planning. This is recommended to be updated at minimum on a biannual basis to align with the municipality's biannual OSIM structure inspections. Ongoing and regular updates to the bridge prioritization program will ensure a non-subjective, greater good approach is maintained.
Next slide. So is there any questions at this point in time? I guess the biggest thing to take away from this is that now that we've assessed the entirety of your structures, 103 out of the 114, from the public meeting that was held in October, and as from the previous time we were here, there hasn't been a lot of change in your high priority structures. That hasn't changed. So we've and the way that they've been assessed out. Overall, your Garifraxa Street Bridge, which is an important arterial portion to your community segment of road, has also rated higher, but it is 100. It was the BCI was at 100, so therefore it's not your most important structure in the community, but it is sussing out as one of your most important structures. Essentially, this is a tool that your staff can utilize to keep up to date on a biannual basis that allows you to prioritize the structures with anything that comes to light, new situations that at this point in time have not risen yet. As variables change in the community and road networks change potentially, and so it is important that this is maintained as you go forward. We'd invite any questions that you might have at this time.
Start us off, Doug.
So first of all, thank you for all your work you've done on this. I think it's a great tool. I'm really happy to see that we have a plan. Because my few years I've been on council now, it always seems like we're just sort of I guess they call it whack-a-mole, like fix this one. Oh no, I gotta fix this one. Now we gotta fix this one. And this way we have a plan and we have the data to back it up. So I think in some ways it takes a little bit of the political pressure off us to say, we got to fix that bridge over there. But meanwhile, that one over there needs fixed and people are upset about that. So I think it's a great plan. My general concern is, okay, we have a plan and we know sort of where we're going. Now, our director just has to come up with $19 million to get on top of this in the next few years. So it's good that we know that. I don't know how we're going to do that, but at least I think we can start picking the fruit and say, okay, these are the ones we got to get going on. So I think it's a great plan. I think we're going in the right direction. I really look forward to try to get on top of this. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could add to that, the important part to take away from this too is the dollar values are there to assess. I know they're very large. It had to assess this process, although it didn't factor in the dollars when we were looking at the importance of these structures, just to take that out of it would give some less subjectivity to the process. We're looking at what is the most important to maintain health and safety in the community, essentially, and your level of service that you're able to provide. Like you said, a non-subjective approach takes the pressure off council. Going forward, the intention is to reduce that cost, obviously, and to look at to review options for every structure that would reduce that cost. So in some cases, you could put in for example, what happened on structure 189 and 189 on side road 25, we replaced a large concrete box culvert with a twin inlet CSP structure, two CSPs, which reduced the cost by probably $250,000. There's other, staff will be always looking at ways to reduce those costs. So for 37 and 38, high level, looking at it at this point from a background engineering perspective, there is potential ways to replace those structures with something that, maybe 37, I'm thinking about the right structures, becomes a culvert as opposed to what's there now, a concrete structure. And as one of them is an overflow acts as an overflow. So you could potentially still see the same hydraulic capacity with a two twin culverts, and then maintain your bridge structure that's there that sees the day-to-day flows. So it is the intention of staff and the responsibility of staff, and through us as well, or your consultant, to always be looking at a cost benefit to reduce those costs. So looks daunting at this point, but the goal is to, from a cost perspective, is to always look at different options that give you that service life, 50, 70 plus years, while also looking at the benefit to the community as a whole.
Jeff, go ahead, Councillor Shea.
You said on the structure priority list, there are 10 items on it, and as we check ones off and get them done, others would bubble up onto that list. The candidates for closure also has 10. Is that a similar situation that we would be expanding that list over time once we've committed to having a bridge closed or removed, that we would add others to this list?
The short answer is, I mean, you could, but these are the structures that yeah, you would have an assessment, but these are your 10 that are candidates for closure now, and I'm not sure that you'd want to continue to close structures, just to reduce down to, say, 60 out of your 103, for instance, as hypothetical. But these are structures that we see as, I'm just picking one out of the air here, but N188, you've got two properties that are accessible on that road, where we've just improved a structure 189 as the twin CSP, but you've got access on both sides. So that 188 could stand to be closed for a long term. It doesn't impact your EMS time response time. It does, but very, very minimally. And then local access, there's no accessibility issues. If there was a farm access or a resident access, the time it takes to get from one side to the other, or from an operations perspective in your community, like to plow or to do anything like that, it's something that that structure could remain closed for a long period of time. The other structures beyond the top 10, there may be a few more that bump into there, but I'd say that this is your list that I'd maintain as candidates for closure. We say that they're candidates for closure. Not necessarily that this doesn't necessarily mean that they could never be reopened. This is still a right of way. So it really does depend on a few scenarios where if something was brought to council and like I said, in 10 years from now, you decided to, that structure, say, dare I say, G33 brings to light, which is the Traverston Bridge, and there's enough push or there's a change in that dynamic of the use of those roads and the need for that road, then that might change. That might change your priority. So some of these candidates for long-term closure could also be potentially bumped into a structure that needs to be replaced again in the future. So this is your list of the candidates for closure. Yep.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Doug.
And just a question about one of the bridges that's on here for potential closure. I just wondered about that N61, 061. Is that road like the east-west roads to me are our most valuable roads, and then our side roads are questionable in some cases, but is that not is that not a valuable road? The one going, that's concession 14 in Normanby, and 61 would close that coming off of the highway. We have to do a little jog there, but I'm just curious why that was picked to be closed eventually. Sorry.
So that one from our traffic counts had 130 vehicles for the ADT. As did structure 62 beside it, I think. And again, emergency routes were minimally impacted. Now, as Chris had said before, it could change. So those traffic counts were from 2016. So if there's new traffic data available that's showing otherwise, then absolutely, this list could change. But based on the data we had, it showed an ADT of 134 vehicles. So yeah, kind of alluded that it wasn't as important as some of the other structures on the high priority list. But again, yeah, based on different scenarios, this could absolutely change. Yep.
Sorry, and if I could add, the OSIM report, the latest in 2024, shows a remaining service life of 10 plus years. So this is just saying that these are candidates. So when, at this point in time, snapshot, if you were to need to close that structure for any reason, that it would not be as high on your priority list as your other remaining 93 structures that we assessed. But if they're, within 10 years, so on a biennial basis, you'll inspect these structures and the BCI may not change the next time. It may still be in the same state. So then you'll still remain with 10 years. This is just saying that when the time comes, and it will, to replace this structure or rehab it, we may be able to do something to this structure right now that there is a small rehab that you could do. But when we're looking at this whole program it's hard to separate all those individually. But if there's small low hanging fruit, I guess you could say of a deck, something that you could take the deck off and do that. That is something that staff will have to continue to maintain. But I would say that if you're looking at a structure like N61 that has a deck, it comes up for the need for a deck repair. This is telling you that you should put your money somewhere differently on your higher priority. So you'd still, you don't want to, as much as you don't want to see a structure be disintegrate into, you'd probably let this one, this is telling you that you should let this structure go to be potentially closed, and it will not impact your network as the others will.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wondered too, like we do have our roads director here too and whatnot, how much the snow plowing and grading comes into factor. Like I think in some of these roads, like Side Road 25, for example, you close that one bridge. And there's some farm, I don't think there's any residents on the south side of it. So how much money do you put into keeping it up to grade for a farmer to use the road sort of thing? So do you close it in the wintertime? Do you put any gravel in the summertime? So I would think that would become a factor for our staff, that they would look at that. And I don't think that's not something you took into consideration in your report, right?
So from a subjectivity perspective, we did speak with staff and operations staff, and we did look at certain structures that may have had that issue. What measured that was your local access from one side, or sorry, your detour from one side to the other, which also encompasses the detours that your equipment would need to take as well. So that variable factor somewhat factors that in. If there's a specific scenario that's causes a great issue for operations, then and that may change moving forward as well. So that could change on an annual basis. Equipment might change. The ability to service that road may change. Those will have to be factored in moving forward when we're looking at these structures and prioritizing these structures. But at this point, this is where we fell in. I know Tim and Jeff have looked at that and factored that into some of these. Yes.
Go ahead, Doug. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you. So the traffic counts were taken as a snapshot in time, and that's what you guys assessed on. How often do we do the traffic counts? Because, for instance, like when we've got the bridge now temporarily closed on the 16th in Normandy, that puts more traffic over to the two bridges on the 14th in Normandy. So that would bump their ratings up. Like, so is this something that, you know, when you look at, like, and it could be N61 that you're talking about, you know, maybe down the road, and it's 50 feet away from a concrete bridge. So there again, it's another, why would you close one bridge when you've got another perfectly good or semi-good structure there already? Like, why would you not keep it a through road? And as I say, with the 16th and R&B being temporarily closed, needs a new deck on it, there's going to be a lot more traffic on the 14th. So it just, there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. So if I could, when we looked at candidate for structure closures, we did review, and it was reviewed, the impacts that EMS vehicles would have, change in response times, EMS, if one structure was closed and then another structure was closed nearby, those were assessed and reviewed as well. So the overall transportation network, it looked at those variables that basically, if there wasn't a through road, it took that into account from your overall transportation network as a whole. So it may not have had, and I know we're centered on one structure that it's easy to, and that's I guess that's the importance of this program, is to so that we aren't tunnel visioned onto one. We have to look at it from an overall greater good, and overall, what are our most important structures that need to be, need to be addressed now, although it may not make sense because there's not a through road here anymore, but there is a way around it, and it is less impactful when considering a structure in Bentic or another that requires, like B003, I think, is, just throwing it out there. Yeah, it's number 6 on your priority list, has a lot of traffic that goes over it. The municipality should be addressing that structure ahead of something like N61, or because you still have an option with N61 closed to get around, and it is least impactful to your change in response time, local access, from the overall perspective of all your structures when assessing all your structures. Does that help answer?
Well, yes and no, because if we've still got the structure on the 16th closed and then we close the one on the 14th, then all those people have to come back out to the 2nd. It would drastically increase, I think, times for those people to get around. So it's, as I say, it's a very fluent, there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and that's why it's important that this is a living document, because the closure of a structure will impact traffic flows on another road segment. Sorry, and that's more what addresses your question. Yes, so you'll see even we saw from the Kennedy Bridge being closed in 2015. you're seeing around those roads, the increase to traffic. You can tell that there's more traffic down side roads but when it comes down to it, you're really looking at ways, like I said, you're not, these are candidates for closure. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be closed in infamy. These are the structures that do not need to be addressed as much as the other structures, the other 93 structures that you've got. Yep.
Joyce? Go ahead, Councillor Nguyen.
Thank you. But in looking at the map, so NO 61 is on the concession road, concession 14, but N 188 is on side road 25, which is just south. So if you were to close N 061 and the N 188, the only way you can go is north. Like, it doesn't give opportunity for residents that live south of that concession road on off side roads. So you're kind of really leaving like not good leverage for even for EMS if the need was there. So two bridges right there really congested. I wouldn't recommend closing both of those bridges. I would recommend that N 061 should remain open when the time comes if it needs rehabilitation or replacement.
So, yeah, I agree. There's a lot of closures there or proposed. So for EMS, they go to, so they're right in the middle between Durham and Hanover, this area. For EMS, structures, well, if you're looking at the map to the, well, I guess to the west, will go to Hanover, to the east will go to Durham. But in terms of overall traffic in that area, again, as Chris was saying, it's a greater good approach. If you look at the overall traffic on both concessions, it still isn't as much as what N51 would see. I'm not saying that that area is not important, but when we're looking at the overall transportation network, the overall ADT in that area wouldn't be as much as N51, for example. But yet we have looked at detours for EMS in that area. Again, 61 and 188 still have a few years left. There's going to be new, well, I can't speak to when new traffic data is available, but we would of course look at new traffic data if it came out and update this list accordingly. So yeah, this isn't set in stone, and I agree there are a lot of closures in that area, but right now, based on the data we had, structures with N51, B003, they had a much higher ADT even when you combine those two concessions.
So one of the summaries that I'm just coming to is that we have 8-ish bridges closed now. 4 are on the list to recommended candidates to remain closed. 4 would be prioritized to reopen. 6 others would be on the candidate list for eventual closure. So if we concur with your recommendations, is this the news that we as council or as the municipality deliver to the public, that, you know, these 4 closed bridges are going to remain closed, these other 4 closed bridges are going to eventually be reopened, and 6 other bridges are going to be eventually closed, and if that bridge is near you, you might want to be thinking about that down the road. Is this something we're going to do as a council decision, or are we just going to sort of leave this to staff to implement on a case-by-case, year-by-year basis? That's the first half of my question.
Thank you. Good morning, Council. The idea here is once these bridges get identified as candidates for potential closure, I think that information needs to start being conveyed to the public. We've already talked internally about setting up a special project section of our website related to bridge prioritization. And it would be part of an ongoing communication strategy that we would continue to convey. We've talked about perhaps having public information sessions once council has reached a decision, maybe going out to specific communities rather than just having it in Durham, maybe have one in the south end to start to talk about this. I think, and the gentlemen have both mentioned that some of the ones being a fluid document, I'd hate to say these 4, once they go, are forever going to be closed because something could change. We could find new things related to traffic patterns, but I do think it's important that we start as a municipality to communicate the direction we're heading, because there may be choices that residents want to make for their future related to their property, and it gives everybody a chance to prepare. I think the importance of this document is that, and Councillor Hutchison mentioned it, we're starting to be proactive and looking at a plan related to how we're going to manage all of these issues related to bridges, because at the end of the day, we can't keep ignoring them. And if we're proactive, we will continue to evolve this plan. But I see it as, once councils sort of agreed to these priorities and say, this fundamentally makes sense, knowing that. Yeah. Knowing that ultimately it will be a living document and it may change. We need to be out publicly and advising, I think, our community that we do have a plan and we are moving forward. So that's a very vague answer, but I do think we have to get in front of it, and not answering the question, not going out and indicating that this might happen, I think is a disservice to our public as well.
If I could add to that, to Michelle's point, the importance of this too is that you're looking at your overall, the entirety of your transportation network, because we've all been at public meetings where the structure, if there is a structure that's going to be closed, you're either going to get, and we've seen this feedback, residents and members of the community that will either be for it or against the closure. So it becomes a squeaky wheel, and a lot of focus gets put on that particular road segment, for instance, because I do this and I live this lifestyle and I have, this business and I need to operate in this manner. And I need my bridge to be opened. What this does is removes somewhat all of that subjectivity where you're getting that pressure from public. And as Councillor Hutchison pointed out, it does take some pressure off of council because you're following this program. Whether it's, there's some subjective, there's maybe some factors that we're not aware of at this point in time that may factor into that, but that becomes a council decision at that time. But it's important that you follow some sort of program, and this is what we've brought forward to and recommend you follow, because you will get those squeaky wheels that will continue to say, I want my bridge open, and we've been dealing with that for 30 years probably now at this point. So the overall, it's looking at the entirety of your network and not just one road segment where you've got 2 people that are 2 or 3 or 10 that are raising the flag and saying we really need our bridge opened. If they bring something to light, and that's why it's also important, as Michelle said, to keep this as a on your website, an ongoing public process. So there may be something that we're not aware of at this point in time that is brought light to staff and then to eventually to council, that we have to change a structure and move it around. So.
Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you. And this is maybe down the road, but I can ask you guys maybe whether you've seen it or not. The structures that we're looking at possibly closing, should we, we talk about putting it on the website and everything. Should we actually put signage on the bridge to say, it's our intent that this bridge is only going to, once it runs its lifespan in the next 5 years, it's not going to be replaced or rehabilitated. And then to when people are out driving around looking at real estate, they can see that, oh, okay, that bridge is won't be there maybe in the future and that sort of thing. I mean, we've already run into it where, you know, I bought this house in early winter and the snow melted and my road's not paved. You know, and that's the municipality's problem. You know, so if the more proactive we can be to identify those things where somebody will say, well, I bought this piece of property off of, you know, Mr. Smith, and all of a sudden now I'm there and you guys are saying that the bridge that I need to go over, my shortest route, Jeffries, you're not going to answer it? The shortest route, then they're all up in arms at us because we seem to be the fall guy. So I don't know whether you guys have seen that type of an approach or whether it would be a good approach. I don't know.
I certainly don't think that, you know, informing the public is never a bad thing and being transparent. So I would say any idea that you would have to say, you know, if council were to adopt the bridge prioritization program, you could have a piece of signage at the structure to say, you know, this is a structure that has been slated for candidate closure when the time comes. You may open yourself up to a lot more questions at that point in time, but there's I think I don't know if I've seen that in particular. Maybe if you're within a 2-year, you know, it's got 2 years of remaining service life. You've as part of the program, staff say, okay, we're going to put the sign up on the structure now because in 2 years it's disintegrated to the point where the structures, we're not replacing it and it's on the list to not be replaced. So we're allowing the public to understand, you know, within 2 years, I'd say if it's something like N61 and it's got a 10-year lifespan on it still, then you might not want to do that. But when you're within a 2-year period, you may want to say that this structure will be closed, and you'll explain in the board. People might want to get out and read it, but it'll explain right on the board, and you'll put this on your website as well. This is the reason why. You'll have an explanation as to why, but that's not a bad idea. No. So.
I hope I'm not getting off topic, but using barcodes on our bridge might be another alternate that people could just scan in right away to see what the future of that bridge is. Just a thought.
I have a couple questions on our priority list. So B020 is a bridge that has been very controversial over the last few years. And you seem to be saying that we should have that bridge open according to this study. So I guess in some ways there's going to be some happy people and there's going to be some unhappy people on this one. But and it's an expensive bridge, like $3 million right now is what you're predicting. So it's costly. So I guess the good thing about the priority list, I think our staff is on top of it. I think we're sort of working on the ones that we need to work on according to what we've got so far, and this will help us. I do think that there's some opportunities to use other things, like whether it's a prefab bridge you can just drop in, or whether it's culverts, as you said, or steel culverts. I think there's lots of opportunities that we can maybe cut some costs and fit the bill. But the other two on this list that I have a hard time thinking that we're going to put money into them is 90 or N060 and N058, which is on our potential list to upload to the county, right? So I would hope that before we get to the point where we have to put money in there, that we can get rid of those bridges to the county and get that road going so that we don't have to do those ones and we can prioritize other things. So yeah, so I guess what we have to do, good, we got the first top 7 we can sort of deal with and whatnot, but then the last 3, I think there's some questions of where we go with all this. So anyways, that's my thoughts.
Was there a question in your thoughts or opinion? You're off the hook on that one, guys. The county may not be. Joyce, Councillor Newman.
When you're giving the cost, potential cost of what the replacement of that bridge would be, are these based on the current flow of traffic, whether they're single or double lane, or have you taken a single lane bridge and now put it into a double lane? I was just kind of wondering with your cost factors there when you're looking at long-term planning. I mean, I guess that's up to us with request for proposals, like how we replace that bridge. But I was just kind of wondering where your numbers are coming from.
That's a great question, actually. From a high level benchmark cost estimate is what these structures were based on. So conventional concrete structures with a deck area that would be equivalent to what's there now. So the deck area that is there now. So there may be there may be times where you need to increase this. Typically when we go to rebuild a structure and it's a single lane, you'd make it a double lane now to a that's your standard that you'd want to see. However, there is options such as structure one on the 25th side road that was replaced with the twin culverts there a few years ago. That was still reduced to a single lane structure. And some sign that was essentially due to the amount of traffic that it saw on a daily basis. It was servicing 2 residents, I think, beyond that. So in that case, you'd maintain that as a single lane because you can. If it's over 200, I believe the number is 200 vehicles per day, you'd want to increase that to a double lane. And then you've got, no matter what, we always get the comment from the farming community that says, the wider the structure, the better. We want this. I need to bring my implements over the structure. And so we always factor that in when we're looking at the planning process of these structures. But I would say as an engineer, we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't bring these to light to say, hey, there's a way to reduce the cost here. You don't really require this. You've got a road that's being serviced by 2 residents. You just need a method of getting a vehicle over that, an EMS vehicle essentially. So, or a snowplow, garbage truck. That's kind of your, when you're looking at it from that umbrella, it's a case by case basis. But yes, these were based on the information that we had from each deck size, square meters. So we basically and span of the structure. So.
So you're using per square meter, per square foot replacement cost of today's traditional and not anything going forward. West Gray a number of years ago replaced a bridge with a prefab fiberglass infused, not sure just what the wording is. Somehow or another, that bridge is still functioning pretty well, I believe. White's Bridge down in Normanby. And I'm not clear as to why that company went out of business. Some of it had to do with kickback from competition and various things anyways. I'm quite glad that I was on council when we put that one in, but I guess the numbers here, as you said earlier, we took those out, or you took those out of the whole program and the algorithm that you're using so that it wasn't influencing the objectivity of your thing. But sitting here, it's very objective. No matter what we do, we've got to come up with the number to replace this. How much of a shock factor did you put into these numbers? And meaning, are they 100% at today's numbers, 120%, or projecting into the future strategically, have we taken into account for some cost saving measures? Because I believe even at 184,000, I'm not certain that that was the number to replace what we did. So for acceptance from this side, I'd like to get over that shock value that you may have in here.
Through Mr. Mayor, if I could, to individualize every structure to determine every component beyond a benchmark cost would be quite an exercise to review every structure in particular. So it was removed, and I understand from the cost is always a factor, but and that is something that can be done. You may want to take your structure priority list and look at individual costs and further dig into each one of these structures and say, this is a candidate for a prefab structure, which could reduce costs from say N51 from almost $3 million down to $2 million or something like that. We could drill down into those structures. To do that to every structure for this program, this particular exercise that we did, would have taken a lot of effort to do that. If this is something that council would like to do, I guess they could give direction to staff to say, we'd like you to further dig down and drill down into at least the top 10 or the top 25 priority structures to understand how they fall into a cost. If there's priority for number 2, if there's a structure that has a number 2 priority and it is low hanging fruit, you may want to opt to just get that one done. You've got the money in say year 2026 to do that, to get that off the list and maintain your priority list and to update your asset management plan and to keep that to comply, then you may choose to do that. Whereas if you've got a structure that's a $5 million replacement or that may be a little less achievable. The drilling down of these, unfortunately, benchmark costing is what was completed on, is the direction we were given, but certainly it can be drilled down a lot more to understand what each structure would take to replace. To get to that point, sometimes you require a geotechnical study to understand the bearing capacity of the structure, what's there in the soils, whether it's suitable for prefab or whether it needs a H-piles or an integral structure, or whether or not you could just put a box culvert back in to replace it. There's quite a bit of investigation there's a bit of pre-engineering in terms of say a geotechnical report or investigation, a survey that would need to be done just to understand to really drill down to your cost, to understand what that bridge structure or culvert structure could be replaced with. I'd hate to say that you can put a culvert in there that's a lot a quick span, a structure or something like that that's not a piece of technology that's not suitable for the location, and then you move forward with that. You have to look at these on an individual basis and really drill down and do a bit of engineering work ahead of time to get that answer. Unfortunately, you really don't know until sometimes how we excavate the road, like an EG 001, we don't know what we're working against to actually replace that particular structure. Permitting approvals, you may have there's a lot of structures up north of Durham that have red side dace as a species at risk that really impacts your permitting process and your ability to put a certain structure in and methods of construction. These are factors that are somewhat intangible that we can measure. It just would be having to drill down and put more time and effort into that. So I don't know if that really gives you a good answer, but yeah, there is a way to do that. It's just I don't know if you'd want to do it on all your structures, the entirety of all your structures, to look at replacement value and the ability to get beyond that benchmark costing for a typical concrete structure. But yeah, in some cases, these are N51 is a pony truss structure right now, steel structure. That you'd probably, based on the span, likely have to replace that with you'd replace it with a conventional concrete structure, whether it be a precast or otherwise. There's potential that you could do a prefab metal structure like a Bailey Bridge too, if that's was suitable. But all these have to be looked at on an individual basis that take a bit of time and effort to look at. So if that's something that we're asked to do, we most certainly can look at that in greater detail.
Yes, go ahead. Take the microphone away from me before I say something.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council. Despite what I was quoted as saying, my preferred thing to be known for is talking about breadcrumbing and going from a fairly large funnel down to something smaller. And we've started with 114 structures that we had to look at, and the gentleman looked at for us. It's almost like, where do you begin? And I think what we've tried to do here is narrow the funnel, get some fundamental agreement on the fact that these are our priority structures based on a objective set of criteria, knowing that this is a fluid document. Part of the reason we have another meeting scheduled related to bridge financing in March is to start to answer some of these questions. We were well aware, and when we spoke to the gentleman from Triton originally, we knew that these numbers that were in there at the 19.5 million or whatever it is for the top 10 structures, that was a high level estimate based on standard bridge construction, based on width, et cetera. But at the end of the day, we will continue to look at best options based on a case-by-case basis, but we didn't really know how deep we go into that path until we have some fundamental agreement that it makes sense to focus on these 10 or 12 or 15 structures at the outset. So I think it'll be a stepped process. I would like to say, knowing that the 19.5 would be the worst case scenario for these 10 structures, and hoping that we could come in at least 50% of that when the full work was done.
Let's start at 25% and go from there. Councillor Hutchison. Doug?
I just have a couple of quick comments, maybe questions, but I would hope when we get to the point of replacing a bridge, for example, the North Line in Gunnell, there's 6 bridges from between Durham and our boundary going east. That a lot of those are single, I will call them steel pony style structure sort of thing. I would hope that our staff, we will look at replacing like with like. Like North Line in particular is a very narrow road, and sometimes even to pass 2 cars passing each other is difficult. Than to put a 2-lane bridge in all of a sudden, and then you're back down to like a 1-lane road. I don't think makes sense. So I think replacing like with like, I hope we look at that in the future, and that's something our staff will, I'm sure, decide on. But that would help us, I think, in terms of the costing. The other thing I noticed in the list of priorities, the bottom 2, the 60 and 58 again, which I come back to, they have a lifespan of 8 years. So I'm thinking, because our list, it may evolve before we even get to those bridges. There may be other bridges that pop up that we need to deal with before that. So if you took those 2 bridges, which are 8 years, you took them off our list, there's $3 million right there that we don't have to look at right away. That we have a little bit of time on those ones, even though I know it's a fairly high traffic road, that one, the way it is right now. So just some thoughts. There is some flexibility there, sounds like, in terms of what we do. Thanks.
Doug, one.
Thanks. Just another thing I'd like to put in front of council too, and staff. Now that we have a list, I hope we don't get tunnel vision that we're just, we're looking at this top 10, we have an opportunity. There's some, I'll call it low hanging fruit, a couple bridges that just need new decks on them, which would alleviate pressure on other bridges. And because they're not on the list, I don't want us to lose sight that they're there, because by opening those up, spending a few $100,000 and getting those rehabilitated will help take some pressure off other bridges and again, help us to not box people in. It gives them more options to travel throughout the municipality. So just because they're not on the top 10, I don't want to see us get tunnel visioned into just looking at the top 10. Just a thought.
I think our rural supervisor and whatnot looks at every 114 on a weekly basis, and some of them pretty much on a daily basis. So yes, how much of this we can do to resolve ourselves. Go ahead, Tim.
I was gonna bring that up, Chris. So the two bridges in Normanby is not on priority to open, right? Now the number's 55, I think it is, and 56. I call them Hampton and Cliff Yon's Bridge, which the 16th is a busy road. I know we don't have a traffic count since 2016, but it is a busy road. All indications show that it's just, the structure is good, just needs a new top on it. But is that something you wouldn't fix and go ahead with these ones, the priority, or is that how you made this list up? This list, I've taken 4. I've got 4 scratched off here. Stonehill Road is repaired. Kennedy Bridge, that's the first bridge we ever closed. And then the 2 county bridges, I don't even include them. So my list is down to 7. But yeah, the two bridges in Normanby that need probably 300,000 apiece. Would that be something that we should do, or put off and go with these first?
Sorry, it's okay. Yeah, so this is the prior, essentially, if there's you should always maintain your structures based on your OSIM reporting that you receive. So if there's something that is brought to light in your OSIM report that says, there's a deck repair is required, or something that would likely increase the service life of the structure, that is something that, along with this, if it's a rehab, along with this, these structure priority lists, say you're putting that, you're weighing that up against those structures up against 38 and 37. That comes down to me, that would be a council decision as to how you'd have to look at that in that scenario at that point in time. It's very difficult. This gives you the framework of how to prioritize your structures, but there is always going to be that ongoing decision as to, okay, well, now we've got a scenario where, a vehicle has struck this bridge, and that could very well happen. It has happened. And our BCI in the structure has now dropped significantly. Well, we have a decision to make. We've got some maybe insurance money from that or what have you, but you've got to you've got to divert and reprioritize. Unfortunately, these are not looking at fulsome at all the potential rehabs that you could have, but you've really got a finite amount of resources. So if you've only got so much money to play with, you've got to really look at, okay, yes, this is a busy road. Maybe I would suggest the first thing, and I think staff has already been started this, but updating your traffic counts to reinsert into the formulas here. And then that will kind of suss out some of those other structures and yeah, EG 001, structure 44, and structure 20 could fall off your list. They've already been, you've determined that they, well, two of them have been repaired. One is going to be it has been closed for a long period of time. This is the way it has assessed out in the actual prioritization program. But you do need to treat it as a case by case with finite amount of resources. Do you put $2 million towards a bridge repair that is really important as a structure priority list based, or fix the deck on the structure over here? This is telling you need to prioritize 38 and 37. So that's, but at the end of the day, it still comes down to, if you could add into, if this deck is repaired, it will now bump up your structure to say 20 years, 15 years. That's something that has to be, again, on a case by case basis. And then you could put that into the equation here and see where it lands. But at the end of the day, your structure priority list is still your priority structures.
Okay. If I could say one other thing to the council, not saying you're wrong here, Chris, but structure 37 to 38, 38 is closed, 37 is the overflow bridge. Always was a low volume, the north line. I know there's talk of flooding, and we have had flooding maybe 3 times in the last 25 years. It's not a long length of time. And I think what I'm going to say is I would recommend to the council to look at B003 ahead of 38, 37. That's Larry Heupel's bridge, concession 6 in Bentic. And that is a busy road. The last traffic count was 970, which was done in September. So, yeah, I know we got lots of bridges. Which ones? I guess that's up to the council to decide, but to me, that should be up number 1.
So, and if I can just add, I mean, I don't want to get into specifics now about Bridge 3 versus 132. I mean, what we want to get from today's meeting is that we all sort of understand that these are the 10 priority bridges, and staff will come back as we continue to review these, the information that's available, the financing that's available, the conditions. That's what Tim and Jeff will bring back to council and say, we have gone through all the gory detail right now. Next month or the month after, and say, we need to elevate 33 up to number 1. We're not necessarily there yet. These are the top 10 at this moment in time, based on the information that we have available today. And quite clearly, based on everything I'm learning about bridges, this could all change next week, but we fundamentally believe that these are the 10 we need to focus on now. And who jumps to the top of the queue may change tomorrow, next month, or next year.
If I may add, Tim, to your point, and point taken to the B003 is a high priority structure. I would say that if 38 and 37, based on the formulas used and the way that we assessed out the general logic of and rationale of how we calculated the structures or assessed the structures, 38 and 37 would not be so high if you didn't have that flooding risk, and that if there was a moment where you had a structure close and the flood at the same time, that's what this is weighing. So that's why they bump up so high, because now you're stranding 10 plus properties if in case of emergency. So if there's some low hanging fruit in this particular these two structures, is complete a survey, do a desktop kind of levels look at the floodplain and what, if you raise the road slightly in that location, could that eliminate the need to, could you keep these structures closed for a longer period of time? That's where this program unfortunately doesn't dive into all the nitty gritty details and the engineering of each specific structure, but that would be the first thing I would recommend to, as your consultant on these structures, is that'd be the first thing we do is you'd survey that road, and then you'd look at, okay, if we raise the road, does it impact the floodplain, and we've got to deal with the SVCA on that aspect of things, but a bit of gravel a foot higher on a road that eliminates the flooding on that road, or 2 feet, is a lot cheaper than replacing 2 structures. So there, basically, if you eliminate that flooding aspect of that road, these structures would likely bump down lower in your priority list. So that would be the first thing you'd look at in this particular case. So and that's just one. Those are just 2 structures in your 103, but that would be something that's a great example of the pre-engineering that needs to go into some of these that, you could look at. And in most cases, that doesn't involve us. You'd look at a geotech or a geotechnical report or something like that. That would give you the story of this structure and give you a bit more detail as to what you can do for replacement of that structure, or the options that you have available. So again, if 30 and 37 didn't have that flooding issue on North Line Road, they would be lower on that list for sure. So.
If we could talk to Conservation Authority and tell them to control frazzle ice, we may not have flooding anyways. Sorry, Jamie, that's probably off topic. I better get back onto the agenda. Thank you. Any other questions? I think our CEO summed it up in my mind. It doesn't give us an absolute clarity and clear this bridge, and this bridge. 2025, we're going to do this, this, and this. Because as you said, Chris, and Mike, it's fluid. As one bridge goes out, we can kind of think of where traffic is going to go, but it's amazing where people want to flow, and creating individual problems, which upsets this apple cart going forward. Appreciate the work you put forward and putting this in front of us, and how we definitely know. Sorry that your work didn't do anything to make this. Bridges are a priority in West Grey. Some people have even said they're a curse more than they are anything else. We are going to go forward. And there's no more questions on this. You've given us a good professional opinion, and even on that canal one, we've got closing in on $4 million if we go to replace those. And it may take, if we can find the gravel close by, it's in Canal, I think maybe we could, of raising the road and eliminating the issue that you've just described. That makes this a lot more plausible. And maybe it's not about replacing bridges, but replacing, updating and upgrading our traffic corridors more than anything else as we move forward, because cost is a huge factor here. We had an all candidates meeting for the provincial election, and it was on healthcare. If we can't get people moving and whatnot, even this transportation, that feeds into the healthcare, the health and wealth of our community. So if there's no other questions, We'll take this together. Believe we're looking, you said March 11th, I think it is. With we can take this information and adapt it to Jeff and Tim, how they're going to resolve all of this for a couple of $100,000 a year going forward. Is that any pressure on the two individuals? Anyways, any other questions? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike, Chris. It's, yeah, given us a roadmap, not necessarily a detail right down to an absolute GPS. Another thing that I'm struggling to deal with, but anyways, they tell me to go on one road and I already know I should be going on another one, so it's options that we have forward. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your work. Okay. So what do we got next here? Go ahead.
Could we do a 5-minute break or something before we have our director do his report?
Well, that's not a point of order. That's just a requirement.
Oh,
Yes. Yes, we will. Thank you.
okay.
Yeah. 5 minutes. That sounds like a good idea. We'll take a short recess to digest. back to order. Thank you. And next on our agenda is page 12. We have a report from our director, Mr. Aiken. I'll let you take it away, sir.
So I don't think there's anything in the report that we haven't already discussed. I think the primary achievement here is when I started here, I've given you a total of 9 staff reports discussing 10 bridges. 6 were the result of short-term closure. Also, at the same time, we did an environmental assessment on 2 structures, one for replacement and one for closure. What we learned through that process of the staff reports and the EA is that we were treating each individual bridge in silos, and that process wasn't working. So we knew we had to change up our strategy and come up with a plan that looked at it collectively, all as one, not just the bridge, but the entire transportation network. So the staff report you have in front of you discusses the bridge prioritization strategy and the results of it.
Any questions for our director? Joyce, Councillor Noon, go ahead, please.
Thank you for the report and thank you for your recommendations, but I'm just wondering in your recommendations, if we could tweak it a little bit, because I know we have a finance meeting coming up with bridges in March, but that we accepted in general that we could maybe change the prioritization of which bridge we would do first, especially if maintenance it could factor, the budgeting part of it. So if we could accept your recommendation in principle rather than in the list, like going by the list, if we could change those 10 bridges based on what our supervisor of roads had made comment to, just to kind of help prioritize the list based on what he had said.
Yeah, Tim and I'll be chatting about that later. But the list presented on front of you, those are the top 10. And I think what you'll see this being a living, breathing document, the actual pecking order, for lack of a better word, of the 10 will change at least every 2 years when we do the updated OLSUMs and the traffic counts. We've already made a commitment this year for our construction project. And then the balance of our bridge money will be discussed at the March 11th council meeting. The only comment I have on that, you're only talking about $300,000. So there isn't going to be, starting to moving bridges around today isn't going to have any significant impact on the decision you make on March 11th, unless you decide to go rogue and add a 0 to that number, for example. So I mean, if you want to make that change, it doesn't really have any significant impact on how we move forward in 2025.
Go ahead, Councillor New.
No, I realize, no, I want to keep the 10 that you've recommended, as well as our engineers have made comment to, but it's just that we have that opportunity to change within that list, our first priority at such time if it's needed. Thank you.
I think what Councillor Noon is saying is that way the motion is approves. If I could make a suggestion, I think Councillor Noon, what you're saying is receive. If we receive those recommendations, we're not approving them. This recommendation, way I read it, we're approving those recommendations. I think we want to, Councillor Noon, change that wording to receive. And the same with number 2, receive the recommendations. Not to approve them or accept them. Because we've already, I think in Stonehill Road or EG1, there's been updated information in that already. So that's, I think we're receiving it and going forward. That's what you're looking for? Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, it's probably reasonable, given that G44 will fall off there at the end of the year, so that table's gonna have to be updated by the end of the year anyhow. At least the one table for sure, first table.
Michelle?
Thank you. And just to clarify, what we want from today is to be able to go forward knowing that council understands that these are the top 10 priorities. And as I said, where they land, but these are the ones that will form our work plan until we get any new data otherwise to tell us we need to shift. And I do suspect that Director Aitken, you will be continually updated on this process. This isn't going away and we've solved the problem. This will continually be before this council and likely the next and the next.
Jamie? Kirk Eckensweiler?
Thank you, Mayor Eccles, through you. Just to add to what the CEO has said and the comments that I've heard from council, I think if council were to approve in principle and accept in principle, that would allow for some flexibility and changes based on the needs and the condition of the bridges as it goes. What this is just setting a foundation for us so that we can build upon. So doing that in principle, I think probably is sufficient, and it will allow us to move forward with some sort of a plan moving forward.
Jeff, Councillor Shea.
I have no objection to approving or accepting in principle, except that it's a vague sort of word. Both aspects of the report do have conditional provisions in them. The structure priority list does say this list will be kept up to date with structural analyzed biannually. And the other one, candidates for closure, has right in its name that these are candidates for closure. These are not bridges that are going to be closed. These are bridges that are going to be considered for closure. So I think the existing language is sufficiently flexible. But if people want to go with adding in general, I don't have any objection, except for I don't know what it means.
Go ahead, Councillor Townsend. Doug?
I guess my interpretation of some of this is there is the top 10 recommended structures based on the science, which is what you guys have brought us. And then there's going to be another list devised based on some local knowledge, common sense, and what works best for the overall municipality. And the two will kind of work together. But to me, they're, as I say, these gentlemen came up with a top 10 based on the science. And then we also have to factor in what's makes good sense from our staff recommendation, that although, as I say, this is based on the science, some of those will move around and others may be added. And rehabilitation work may be done ahead of a bridge replacement to provide a better flow for the municipality. That's where I think what this all boils down to.
Any other questions or comments?
If I'm able.
Chris, go ahead.
Yep. The way I interpret it, what staff is trying to get through is that you're approving the framework of this. It's important to follow this framework, because otherwise you'll be back in the same kind of, well, this structure is actually more important than this is. So what you're actually approving is the framework of how this is set up, how you insert number here. It's a plug and play process, which will all be developed with staff, with operations change, equipment changes, the ability to access those roads changes. You'll always have an ongoing, that's why it's important that this is a fluid document, but what you're approving today is the framework of how you get to these numbers and develop the structure priority list. That's what's important to take away, I think, from today, is that you've got a way that is an objective way to assess your structures, which gets away from, well, there's a little factor here. Anything that jumps out of this equation, I guess you could say, from how we develop this list, is then not following this framework. So I think that's important to, what you're approving today is the actual framework and a path to follow. How those suss out, and they will change. As I mentioned previously, 30 and 37, although top on the list, a bit of engineering could say, actually, we can fix this very easily by raising the road. Now, and that's less than $100,000 of granulars may be able to take that off of the plate, and so this is constantly a living and breathing document, but it's the framework that you need to still continue to follow, whether it's inserting the numbers of the variables and scoring those. It's the scoring process. It's the formula that you're using to arrive at this list. So I think that's what's important to take away is the framework.
Michelle.
Thank you. And I just want to be clear, I don't anticipate at this point that we will be coming forward with another list. We may update this list based on the knowledge we get from our team out in the field. Some may move up and down. Some may at some point come off that list and another one be inserted into that list, in which case we would bring that back to council, keep you informed of what that is. But we're not going out at this point to actively solicit another list. We've had public meetings. We've taken the engineering reports in this process, and we're focusing on these 10 for the time being. And unless something new comes before us, this is the framework.
Done a lot of discussion on the motion before we even got it on the floor. That's my fault. Any more questions on the report itself? We have somebody that would like to move a recommendation from this report. Councillor Hutchison. You're moving it as presented? That's what.
Yes, I think it's fine.
Okay. Second, Councillor Shea. Any questions, comments on the recommendation as moved? You want to take the chair for a second, Mr. Forster? Thank you. Knew you would. Thank you. If I could, I just agree with you that this is a living document and whatnot, but just that word approves. We're approving the way this motion is written. We're approving the recommendations for the replacement rehabilitation as outlined in the Bridge Prioritized Program and Study. Program study. The second one I'm okay with is Councillor Shea has put out the candidate, except for candidate of these structures. We haven't said that that's an absolute. I can stick handle around that one, but that first one says we're approving the recommendations. Approving the recommendations. If we make any change to that list, what I see is we've got to go back and rescind this because we've already approved the recommendations. That's approving the recommendations as presented in the list on the Bridge Prioritization Program. I'm offering to say in the first move, we'll receive the recommendations and in principle at the end, meaning that we're receiving it, we're not approving it, it may be adjusted. That gives me the understanding that the flexibility is there to move it. But the way those recommendations are, Bridge Canal 36 and 38, whatever it is there, on the fourth line. You're approving the recommendations, and then the recommendations are, here it is with a $4 million bridge replacement. That's not where I believe we're going. March 11th will come and we'll come with some ideas. But we've already, to me, this is, we're approving the recommendations. If you're following through on it, that's why I'm putting forward a motion, an amendment to say receive, and they receive the recommendations, and at the end, in principle.
All right, I'm going to refer to the clerk for next steps.
God, you're good at this.
Through chair to council, I would suggest that amending the motion to receives in principle and having it the way it is right now is not necessarily germane to what's on the floor at this moment. Procedurally, I think if you amended the motion to approves and then added in principle at the end, it allows for what the mayor is suggesting to change it more free flowing without being committed to the 10 in the ranked order that they're at. So Miracles, I'm not sure if that's your intent. I think by just adding that in principle to the end would fit with what you're doing and would still be germane to the motion. And that's my suggestion for proceeding in this fashion.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll go with that.
So through the chair, what the mayor is moving that the motion be that part one of the motion be amended by adding the words in principle to the end.
So do we have to ask the original mover and seconder? No.
So procedurally, the mayor has moved the amending motion, so we just need a seconder for that, and then we'll vote on that.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Noon seconds the motion. Are we open to more comments? Yes, or Councillor Hutchison.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, we could have done a friendly amendment or whatever also, but I just do look at the statement in the our engineer's report here. It says ongoing and regular updates to the bridge prioritization program will ensure a non-subjective greater good approach is maintained. So to me, I think that sort of says that, you know, we're allowed to make changes as we see fit, sort of thing. So I think it says the same thing, but that's fine. I have no problem either way.
Councillor Noon.
And I just want to confirm too that we're not altering the list. We're just maybe rearranging it like that. Because like our engineer had mentioned, if we want to start adding now, then we're getting out of what was the intent here was to get the prioritization listing based on today's findings. So I get that. So I don't want to make that we're going to add anything to it. It's just that we have that flexibility if and when we discuss it further in March. Thank you.
All right, so can I get from the clerk what we need to vote on next?
So through the chair to council, if there's no other debate on the motion to amend, then we would need to call the vote on this. If it passes, council would vote on the main motion as amended. If it fails, council would vote on the original main motion.
All right, so we're calling on the vote to amend motion. All right, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries.
So through the chair to council, the motion on the floor now is that in consideration of the staff report, council approves the recommendation for replacement/rehabilitation as outlined in the bridge prioritization program study in principle and accepts the recommendations for candidate structures for closure as outlined in the bridge prioritization program study.
All right, so we'll call the vote on this motion then. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion is carried. All right, I'll transfer the chair back to the mayor.
I didn't know you got that authority. I didn't give you that one. No. Thank you very much, Councillor Forrester, for that. Appreciate council. That's it for reports. And we need a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special council meeting. 2025-012. We have a mover for that bylaw. Councillor Shea and Councillor Townsend. Any questions or comments on the motion? Call the question. All those in favor of bylaw? Any opposed? That's carried. With all business done on the agenda, I move that we adjourn. Everybody have a great day. Be prepared for the onslaught of snow that's supposed to come today and the second storm that's coming on Saturday. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And again, gentlemen, thank you.